Good morning, everyone, and today we're going to be doing something quite different. We're actually going to be canning, water bath canning to be more precise, the tomato sauce that I created just yesterday, which I've let cool overnight. If this sounds like something you would like to learn about, how to can your own homemade tomato sauce, then keep watching. So like I said, what we're gonna be doing today is canning my tomato sauce. I made it last night from scratch with fresh Campari tomatoes, onion, a little carrot for sweetness, garlic, and basil. That's all that's in this particular tomato sauce. Now this tomato sauce, it's a base. You can make it into, it's basically a marinara already, right? You can also make it into a spaghetti sauce, or you can make it to a bolognese sauce, a meat sauce, whatever. It's basically your base. And you know, my husband loves it because he can't do most pasta sauces because it upsets his stomach, but mine does not. So whenever you are preparing to can something, you really need to research about canning, figure out which one is best for you. I happen to do both, pressure canning as well as water bath canning. And my preference for ease and less stress is water bath canning, but that has to be with high acid foods. It cannot be with low acid foods. So what we end up having to do is fill your water bath canner, which can be a pot, as long as you have something on the bottom that will keep your mason jars from sitting directly on the bottom. This one, it actually came with this basket. There's some that come with actual shelves, if you will, like little plates. And with those allow you to put your cans on the bottom, but if it comes with two, you can also put the second one on top, and you could do a double stack layer in your water bath canner. Now the one that I have at home, obviously I can do that with. This one only came with the basket, and it happens to be granite ware, but you can find them in most hardware stores. You can find them in the big box stores too. It just depends on, you know, kind of what's going on in the world. But all you do is fill this with water. And the science behind this, between the water heating up and the pressures in the jars, the air will escape through the top and it will secure your lid, which it will be a mason jar lid that has the gasket in it. There's also a different type called a Tatler lid, but I'm not going to get off on the subject on that. So with the heat in the water and your jar in the water, that heat allows the air to escape. It expands, it escapes into the water, therefore creating a permanent seal until you're ready to actually open that seal and use the jar. So that's what we're gonna do. It makes your product shelf stable. So you don't have to worry about anything getting into it or it spoiling, provided you do exactly as I show you. If you do exactly as I show you and you also do your research, there are ball canning books. There's also a website which I'll put on the screen. It's like the National Food Preservation website. You read those introductory pages and you're off to a good start. You'd also have to stop and think, because this is science. It's food science, old school kitchen science, but it works. It can help you preserve your food for when you want to use it later or long-term prepping purposes, okay? All right, so I'm going to take this and set it out of the way, and we're going to get started. Now, first things first, the canning jars. They must be cleaned and sanitized. You can do this if you happen to have a dishwasher that has a sani wash. If your dishwasher doesn't have a sani wash, you wash it with soap and water, you rinse it out, and then you'll get a cookie sheet, set your oven to 200 degrees, and you'll let your jars sanitize in your oven for at least 30 to 45 minutes. I usually let mine stay in for about an hour, and that's usually because I am still doing something here in the kitchen while I'm letting my jars warm up. Now, the product that we're doing today is my homemade tomato sauce with basil in it. Now, I made this last night. It's been in the refrigerator. It's cold. My jars were sanitized overnight and they have cooled. You saw that I had my pot, it was empty, no water in it, so it's also cool or cold, however you want to take it. You never want to put hot product into a cold jar. You never want to put hot product into a hot jar, into a cold canner, ever. Everything that you put in the canner needs to be at the same temperature. So in a little while, I'll fill up my canner with water, and the water only needs to be about 1 inch to 1.5 inches, if that, over the surface of the canning jar. So that's the reason why I'm leaving it there, because normally I do the big jars. Well, I'm gonna do small jars because it's just me and Paul here. And also, if I'm not here and he decides he wants some sauce, this is small enough to where he can use part of it and put it in the fridge, and I know it's not gonna go to waste, because he can't eat lots of pasta sauce in a week, although he would love to. So you got cold product, cold jar, cold canner. And from there, it will all warm up. It will begin to boil. Once it begins to boil, the air will start escaping. And once the air starts escaping, your lids will be well on the way for it to actually process and seal. So I'm just gonna fast forward through these next few steps of simply filling my jars. But it's very important that your jar is cold if your product is cold, and your canner must also be cold. If your product is hot, then these need to be hot, and you already need to have had water in your canner boiling, warming up, so that it is hot product in a hot jar going into a hot canner. Okay? Okay. Okay, I needed a little bit of water. I needed a little bit of water. So you'll see that what I have here is your basic teaspoon. Now, why am I not using my regular measuring and baking and canning supplies? It's because I don't have all of them here. I have to bring little bits of things here into the house because my husband's very much a neat-nick, as he should be. So I don't have my canning funnels. I don't have my regular teaspoons, tablespoons, and cups and things like that. I make do with what I have here. The same thing for you. You make do with what it is that you have here. Now, these beautiful spices, I'm going to move them out of the way. This is just to show you that you can use fresh. You don't have to use dry whenever you're canning. Dry, you have to back off the amount you would normally use, because in the process of actually canning it, it can turn, certain herbs and spices can turn bitter, and others can be really intensified where it overwhelms the sauce. So I don't want to do that. So I didn't use any of these extra spices that I normally would use. But I did use my fresh basil, and I already put it in my sauce when I was cooking it last night. What I did, when you watch the video for this sauce, you're not gonna see the basil in it. And that's because after I've boiled my sauce and it's ready to go, just like with shrimp, I put my basil in and I let the residual heat go ahead and introduce that spice throughout the sauce. My reasoning for that is that I don't want the basil to overwhelm the tomato, especially since it's gonna be in a small jar, okay? What you can do instead of putting it in your sauce is actually just put the few basil leaves that you want inside your jar so that you know that it's there. And I might put a few, like 1 or 2 basil leaves in each one of the jars just to show you guys. But because we're using a tomato product, and we have to make sure that we're not using low acid foods, that we're using high acid foods in the WaterBath canning. I am gonna put, normally it would be a tablespoon in each mason jar, but that would be because those jars would be pints and quarts. This is a half of a pint, it's 8 ounces. So I'm only gonna use a teaspoon. And the reason why it has to be lemon juice concentrate is because it's concentrated, you know what the pH level is of the lemon juice. I have fresh lemon juice from my Meyer lemon tree from my backyard, right? But I can't use that because you don't know what the pH is of that lemon juice. It's delicious, but we have to make sure that it is pH balanced, and this is our guarantee. And you'll also read that on the website for food preservation and also in your bulk canning book. And again, what we're doing is kitchen science. So I'm probably gonna have to step to the side to get this off. I don't know why I always have problems opening packages and such, but they have that sealed really well. Okay, so I got it started. Now to each one of my jars, and I'm hoping that you can see, well, I see that you can see a corner of the jars, right? Right, okay. So for each one of my jars, I'm gonna take a teaspoon of the lemon juice concentrate, and I'm gonna pour it into the jar, okay? I anticipate that this is gonna make me, like 6 jars, but I have 8, so I'm gonna leave 2 of them unprepared. Okay. So now that's been done. The next thing that I'm gonna do is salt. You don't have to salt your food that you're cooking. You don't have to salt the things that are going into your canning jars, right? In case you didn't know, you don't. It's your option if you want to salt it or not. The reason that I salt mine is because I want flavor in my food. I don't want to turn around and have a bland dish because I didn't salt all of the ingredients going into my mason jar. So since there's very little salt in my sauce, I'm gonna put a little bit of salt in each jar. Now let's discuss salt. Whenever you're canning, you cannot use iodized table salt. Iodized Morton's, iodized Great Value, iodized HEB, iodized Tom Thumb, whatever grocery store it is that you use, you cannot use iodized salt. Why? Because it discolors your jars. Don't use it. Use plain salt, canning salt, Himalayan pink sea salt, gray sea salt if that's what you use, but make sure it is not iodized. Iodized is a big no-no. So for me, I'm just gonna put a pinch, literally, of salt in each one of my jars. I don't want it over salted. It's actually, I'm doing half a pinch in each jar. But it's enough salt. Because once you cook your final dish, you're gonna be tasting it. You better be tasting it as you cook to make sure that everything is precisely as it needs to be. So the next step after I've done this, and if you'll notice, I'm not doing one jar at a time completely with the process. The reason for that is because you want to make sure that you don't forget any steps. This way you can ensure yourself at least 95% that you're not going to forget a step. Why? Because it's very, very important. Okay? Now, for the fresh basil, I have basil already in my sauce. I don't want to overwhelm it with basil, but I do want to make sure that it has enough. So for 3 of my jars, I will put a fresh basil leaf at the bottom. And then for 3 of my jars, I will leave it just as sauce. How I will determine that is when I dip my sauce out, when I dip a basil leaf out, I'm gonna try and count it in the sauce so that I know the same number will go into the jars pretty much. Okay, and you can also wait on this step and put the fresh basil at the top, but I just like to put it at the bottom because that's where the heat's gonna be coming so that that basil can really freshen and permeate my jars. Now, am I gonna take a fresh basil leaf like this without washing it? You probably could, because everything underneath that pressure and that heat will be killed, but I'm not gonna do that. So I'm gonna step off camera, I'm gonna wash some of my basil leaves, and then you'll see me come back. Okay, so here are my 3 fresh basil leaves. They've already been washed. So I'm gonna set them here, 1 in each jar. And so that's been done. The next step is to actually fill the jars. So that's where I'm gonna begin. You see how nice and thick my sauce is? This is gonna be so good on pasta. Paul plans on eating it in rice. So here I can see, if you can, 1 basil leaf is here. Try and get your product inside the jar. So that's a total of 2 basil leaves that I can see for sure. Here's a small one, that's 3 in this jar. Now, if you have a funnel, that makes this so much easier. So much easier because you don't have to worry about getting the tops of your jars so dirty. So you should always have a napkin, or you should have paper towels, or you should have a rag that you would use to clean your jars. Now, you're gonna see me do that in one of my close to the end steps, because once I clean it, I'm also going to use vinegar to go over the top. That just makes double sure that there's no bacteria going into your jars. You'll also notice that I didn't fill my jar all the way to the top. Now, you can fill your jar all the way close to the top, like to about this rim here. And I'm gonna come over and show you the mason jar up close and teach you a little trick. Now, if you can see the mason jar, I'm turning it around and you can see the twist line that I'm resting my nail on, or it's the screw line. These are actually in increments of measurements, starting from here. This is 1 inch. That's 1 inch of headspace. This is a 1/2 inch of headspace. And this is 1/4 of an inch of headspace. So if you don't have the measuring tool that usually comes in the ball packet, you can actually use your jars like they did in old school to know. Now, I'm going to use a 1 inch headspace. Some people with tomato products, they use a 1/2 inch or they use a 1/4 of an inch. I've just always personally felt safer by using 1 inch because I expect that to be enough headspace so that I don't have any siphoning. Siphoning is not bad. I just personally don't like siphoning, so I stop it at 1 inch. But I suggest that you follow the ball guidebook of canning, whatever their directions are. If you're somebody that's new starting out, you follow their directions precisely, okay? If they tell you to use a 1/4 inch headspace, then that's what you use, a 1/4 inch headspace, okay? Where's my roll of paper towels? I'm gonna grab my roll of paper. Oh, there it is on the table. So I have my paper towels over here. I'm just gonna go ahead and clean the outside of my jar. Everything with canning is cleanliness and sanitization. Sanitization, okay? That's everything. So you wanna make sure that your threads are clean. You wanna make sure that your rim is clean. Then we're gonna clean and sanitize it with vinegar too, just the top part of the rim. But I'm gonna get all my jars filled first, and then I'll come back and I'll show you that step. So now what I'm doing is I am cleaning the outward threads of the jars, as well as the top edge. Now, one very important thing that you're also gonna need to do is debubble. And you're thinking, Raina, what is that? Debubble. It's just like what it sounds. Whenever you put something in a jar, there's a possibility that there are air bubbles trapped in the product, right? So there's a special tool that you'll get inside your ball canning kit if you pick one of those up, called a debubbler, and it's just a stick. Basically a plastic stick. Some of them have the measurements of 1 inch headspace, 1/2 inch headspace, 1/4 inch headspace attached to it. They're usually the green ones. But you just take that tool. I'm gonna be using a knife because that's what I have here. And you just kind of move your product around a little bit. Why do you move your product around a little bit? It gives the opportunity for any bubbles that may have gotten trapped that you can see, and sometimes you can't see, gets it a chance to move to the top, okay? Now you'll notice I'm going straight in and straight out. That's because I just wiped my jars and I'm not wanting to do that again. Now, we still haven't done the vinegar process, right? So, when I do the vinegar process, that's the final process before I put on my lid, right? Now, old school, when it came to lids, you were responsible for boiling those lids a little bit. Now you could just put it in hot water if you want to, but you don't have to. You can put your lids on cold now. Ball canning lids, let me specify that. I can't speak on anybody else's, but with the ball canning lids, they've made it now where you don't have to pre-boil the lids, okay? All right. And here are all of our lids. Now, you do want to inspect your lids. You want to make sure that you have a nice gasket here that has no scratches, no anything in it. Okay, I'm gonna grab my vinegar real quick. So here is my vinegar, and it's just plain white vinegar. They do have pickling vinegar. You don't have to use pickling vinegar. Everything for canning doesn't have to be for canning. You have to remember that this was something that was started like in the 1900s for food preservation. You don't even need a lot of vinegar, but you want some vinegar, okay? Because it's gonna clean the top of your lids, and you're also, depending on where you live, if you have hard water, you also put vinegar inside the pot of your boiling water so that when your jars come out, they come out nice and pristine clean. No dots, no hard water stains, no whiteness, okay? Cloudiness, shall I say. So I just dipped in my vinegar, my napkin, and I'm just gonna go right around the top. See that? And there's nothing there. So now I'm gonna use the opposite side. Now see that one? There was a little bit of tomato sauce there. Dip it again. This one, since there was a little bit of tomato sauce, and you don't have to do that, but this is what I do. I wanna always see that it comes out clean, right? And so you use one side, and then you turn it over, and you use the other.
looks good.
It is good.
Oh, mine. Thank you, boo-boo.
Okay, see that one? This one was not as clean as it could have been. So, I'm gonna dip it and go back over it again. Do you have to do this? No, you do not have to do it a second time. Me, I do. Now see, that one has a little bit of tomato sauce on it, so now I'm running it over again. So I know that it's clean. Let me open it up. Got a new part of clean paper towel for my last one. And I'm gonna clean all the way around. There was a little bit of tomato on it, so I'm cleaning it again. And it's clean, okay? So now that that's done, we have lemon juiced to make sure the acidity is right in our jars, to make sure there's no bacterial growth. We have salted so that we can give it flavor. We have put in all of our ingredients. We have debubbled. We have cleaned and sanitized with vinegar. Now we will put on our lids and our bands. These are our lids. Now I don't know if you can see this one, but I can see in the center of the gasket on this side that there's a dot there. I don't know what that dot is, but it's in the gasket. Like it came from the factory that way. Me, I'm not gonna use it. I'm gonna set that one aside. This is the one that I checked before that I showed you. And this one I will use. I'm just gonna place it on top. Now me, I like to put on all of my lids and then come back and put on all of my rings. So y'all are gonna see me put all of my lids on, okay? Now, all of these lids came from the store, Target to be exact. They were already on these jars. So I know that this one with the spot that's in the lid that I'm questioning is brand new, never been used, but it is man-made. So there are imperfections. So you want to look for things like that. That's why you should always try to have backup new lids in your home whenever you're canning, for that reason. Because just because you purchased it brand new doesn't mean that you'll actually get an opportunity to use it. Okay? All right. So now all we need are the bands. And so these are the bands. We just put them on a paper towel holder, just quick and easy. So I'm going to put on my band. Now you'll notice this band is not 100% secure. When you tighten your band, you want to tighten it to fingertip tight. So you see I can still open this with my fingertips, right? So it's not fingertip tight. That, which is like a quarter turn, is fingertip tight, because now it's on there and without my fingertips, I'm not opening it. It's not cranked down on there, it's just fingertip tight. Why do you want it fingertip tight? Because you got to get that air to be able to escape out. Once it's completely escaped out the air, it creates that vacuum seal that pulls that gasket down onto your jar, and you know that your product is secure and it is sealed. When you store it away, you don't store it with the band. The bands come off. The bands have a very temporary use, okay? And that is only to secure the lid while it's in the canner. That's the only reason why this is here, is to secure the lid at the proper height in the canner while this is processing. So that one is good to go. I'm just gonna do the others, and it's fingertip tight. So I screw until it gets to be a little bit difficult, and then I give it a quarter turn. And then I try to take it off with my fingertips. And if I can't take it off, then it's fingertip tight. So wind, 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 right there. See, just for my fingertips. That's where it stopped. You can see, that's where it stopped, right? Now I'm gonna actually quarter turn. And now I know it's secure. One more again. Screw on the lid until it stops on its own. Stops on its own, then a quarter turn. Last time, try and do this up close. So we screw it until it stops on its own. Y'all can see and y'all can hear that, right? It stopped on its own. Now, quarter turn. That is fingertip tight. Now, you don't want to tousle your jars around now that they're ready to go into the canner. You're just going to pick them straight up and put them right down in the canner. What I'm going to do now off camera is go ahead and fill up my canner with water, tap water, cold, out of the faucet. And then when I come back, I'll show you how that looks. Okay, so now we're here at the stove. I have my water already in my water canner, WaterBath canner, and here is the basket that came with it. And I love it because it actually sits on the side so that you can actually lower the product down into it. Now this is a cold canner. I use water from the faucet that was on the cold tap. Now I'm going to turn on my fire so that it can begin warming up, okay? And now I'm gonna start putting my jars in. So I've got my jars of sauce that are gonna go into the canner that is cold. Cold jar, cold product, cold canner, okay? I cannot stress that enough. If you think, oh, I don't have to do it that way, I wanna speed things up, I'll just put hot product into a lukewarm jar and then just put it right into a boiling hot water bath canner, your product is going to explode. That jar is not tempered glass. It has to warm up slowly. It can take the heat, but it has to be done appropriately. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to place carefully my basket down into the water. Now, if you can see, I'm going to lean this in. There is water and you can see some air already escaping, but there's water that covers the lids, okay? I'm putting my finger in there so that I can see exactly how much water, and it's not enough. That is not an inch of water. So I'm going to be putting more cold water over the top of these jars so that you guys can see exactly how much water needs to be. But you saw that there were bubbles already forming. Okay, so let me go ahead and put some more water in, and then when I come back you will see the right amount of water. Okay, so now you'll see that I have my 4-cup measuring cup. I filled that up once, and now my canner is at 1 inch, and you're probably thinking, Raina Mo, how can you know that that's at 1 inch? This is also a measuring tool. Old school, old timer, old hats. This is a measuring tool. This, the way God made us so perfectly, is exactly 1 inch. So if I put my finger, and yes, I'm accounting for the fact that I have a nail, but if I put my finger in that water and I touch the top of that lid, just like that, I can see where my water line is, and it is at my 1 inch. Now, is it okay to have more water in your, let me turn this. Is it okay to have more water in your pot than the 1 inch? Yes, it's okay. But keep in mind, I know with me, I have injuries, back injuries, neck injuries. I don't want to have to be dealing with a hot pot of water with extra water in there, because water is weight, you know that. We women should all know that water is weight, okay? So this is going to be heavy that you're going to have to deal with. So no, if you don't feel you have to put more water in than that 1 inch, perfect. If you do feel that you need to have somebody like that right there that can help you when everything is done, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and put the lid on, cover it up, and let it get up to a boil. And once it gets up to a boil, then we'll actually start timing the process, and I'll come back and you guys will see me then, okay? Thanks. So now that it's been enough time, you can see how the water boils, and you let it boil like that. Since we're using 8-ounce jars, I'm letting mine boil for, sorry about that if I'm getting y'all woozy. You go ahead and you let that boil here in the WaterBath canner for 35 minutes. Normally it would be 35 to 40 minutes for quarts and half pints, excuse me, pints and quarts. Your pint would be 35 and your quart would be 40. The reason why I'm letting these small jars go for 35 minutes is because that's the recommended by the food preservation website. They haven't tested it in these small half pint jars. So that's the reason why. So you could probably do for 30 minutes, but always follow the directions that are given, the basic instruction and direction that's given at the National Food Preservation website, okay? And when I come back after it's processed, then I will show you what they look like after I take them out, okay? So I went ahead and I took them out and then I covered them. That's just what I do. I started labeling some of them as well, so I'll know what's what. And I have a couple of more that are processing from another video that I'll be sharing with you guys. But I just cover them so that if there's a draft that goes by, they won't cause my jars to crack. The problem that you have to realize is that when you're taking hot jars out of the WaterBath canner or regular canner and your house is cold, like right now here in Texas, overnight the temperature drops. So it's probably about 65 degrees or even lower here. Anyway, it's cold in the house. So the fact that I am doing the WaterBath canner is actually heating up my kitchen. Well, when you open and close doors, you could get a cold draft of cold air and that could actually crack your jars. So to prevent that, I always cover my jars and just let the heat dissipate naturally. You'll start hearing pings. That is your signal that the jars have sealed and that they're closed. So I will come back later and show you how they've been labeled, and you just got a sneak peek at that, but how they've been labeled, and I'll do a test so that you know that the jars have been sealed, okay?